Welcome to this webinar and the launch of the Nordic Mobility Report. My name is Michael Funch and I'll be the moderator through these 2 hours presentations and discussions on mobility in the Nordic region. The report is the first comprehensive overview of cross-border mobility in the Nordic region, and it was an initiative by the Finnish chairmanship of the Nordic Council of Ministers in 2016, and it's been run by Statistics Finland. The first hour of the program, we will look at some of the trends and some of the results of the report, or rather some of the trends as we think they are, because what was uncovered is that there are, in fact, a lot of dark numbers, and we don't really have the full picture always. We will look at what that means for the development and planning in the Nordic region. We don't necessarily know all we should know. We will try to take in questions as we go along from the people who are signed up to the event. We have a very packed program. So please be very short and concise in your questions, but we will try to get around to it if possible. If you look at mobility, it's actually been at the core of Nordic cooperation since the beginning, actually ever since the Nordic Passport Union of 1954. People have settled, studied, and worked all over the region and across borders. This has been challenged a lot in recent times, especially during Corona. But in fact, the trend was going towards decreasing mobility already before Corona. So we will also look at some of those trends. Now we're ready for our first speaker. And he is a person he has not been part of Nordic cooperation quite as long as the Passport Union, but he's definitely a veteran. And he's currently president of the Nordic Council, the parliamentary cooperation. So please, I would like to welcome Bertel Haarder. Mr. Bertel Haarder, are you with us? I think you need the sound. Yeah, we hear you now.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome to you, and thank you for participating in this event. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on mobility in the Nordic region and why this is so important for Nordic cooperation. If you don't mind, I will let you know when there are 2 minutes left of your presentation, and then we can proceed from there. But the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I have been a member of the Nordic Mobility Council for 3 or 4 years, interrupted by a period as Minister for Culture. And it's very sad to look at what happened the latest year under Corona, because a lot of what we have built has broken down. I remember how proud we were when we got the Passport Union, when we got the common labor market. And then during the last year, that has in many ways broken to pieces. Our commuters are really victims of strange acts from the government, because there's a tendency that when there's a problem, we see the problems as something coming from outside. So in Copenhagen, a person from Malmö is a lot more dangerous than a person from Aarhus, in spite of the fact that there has been more contagion in Aarhus than in Malmö most of the time. But that's the way countries are thinking, and particularly at the Norwegian-Swedish border, there has been at Svinesund a total blockade, so that commuters could neither get to their job and get their salary, and they couldn't even get their compensation from the public, from the government, from the local government. So we are at a low point. And when you are at a low point, then it's time to think, how can we get out of this low point? How can we reach heights that we have not reached before? And I have the vision that young people who grow up in the Nordic countries, they should get used to regarding the whole Nordic educational system and the Nordic labor markets as a unity, and they should have access to jobs and to education. And the education you get in one country should be recognized by the other countries. We should not harmonize, but recognize. That's the solution for democratic countries who want to have more educational and labor market cooperation. Not harmonize, but recognize. I have worked with educational barriers for quite some time. Last time when I was Minister for Nordic Affairs, I asked the Minister for Health to remove a border for Swedish skilled workers in the hospital sector, undersköterskor. He refused. A few months later, I became Minister for Health myself. And then I told the civil servants, well, now you have another task. Please give me 3 options so that I can open for Swedish skilled labor in the health sector. And they did, and it was a huge success. I was proud, but then I left office. And then I became member of the Nordic Mobility Council and suddenly got a complaint from some who could not get access to the Danish market. I went to the Danish health minister and asked, what is this? Well, they had reintroduced the barrier. So now there's no free access. And I tell you this because mobility is a question of political will and nothing else. If there is political will, then we can open our educational systems, our labor markets, and we have a lot of benefits from it. We know the young people often have difficulties understanding other Nordic languages, particularly the Danes are difficult to understand because their language is a throat disease like Dutch. But it turns out that if we watch each other's TV series, then suddenly we can understand each other's languages. The Norwegian Skam became famous among teenagers in Denmark and Sweden, hundreds of thousands. My oldest grandchild, she learned Norwegian in 2 weeks by watching Skam. And what happened? Skam was closed for Danes and Swedes because there was a conflict about rights for musicians. Again, this is also a question of political will. So when I look at the Nordic countries and look at education and culture, there's so much to gain. And young people from Denmark could gain a lot from studying in Trondheim or in Uppsala, but very, very few does it. They all strangely do like the birds, they always go south. Why don't we go north? That's what we should discuss in Denmark. But if you look at these very interesting statistics, you can see that a lot of Swedes and Icelanders and Norwegian, in fact, go south to Denmark, and we are very happy that they do so, and they have always done so. But I would like it to be reciprocal, that much more Danes would go north. And I would like that we make it attractive, that we can tell the youngsters, if you take your education or part of it in another Nordic country, it can be recognized 100% when you go back.
Bertel, 2 minutes.
Yes. So thank you for these statistics. I usually think like Winston Churchill, that I only like statistics that I have manipulated myself. But I must admit that these statistics are very, very valuable, and I hope that they will be used, not because it's very praiseworthy what we are doing, but because it shows some potentials. My question all the time is, why are there not much more? Why not more students? Why not more cross-border commuters? But we can only get more students and more commuters in other countries if we make life easy for them, if we have flexibility, if we have mobility, and that is what we should put at the top of the political headline, particularly in the Nordic Council, where I have the privilege to be president for the time being, but also in the Mobility Council, where I was president last year. I'm still a member, and during the Finnish presidency in the coming year, we have a long agenda for creating more mobility, also for students. So
thank you, Bertel. Thank you very much. It's great to hear that it's a question of political will, because of course that's something we want to address today. It's also interesting to hear your example of health workers and the barriers that sometimes arise, because I guess you could argue in a way that the mobility that we have had in the Nordic region is part of the success of our Nordic model and our Nordic economies. Because if you have maybe an economic crisis in one country and a boom, a sort of a boom in another country, then you can work. People can work, move there and work. And I know that's been the case very much in the health sector, and we've kind of helped out each other, both for those who were looking for jobs and those who had jobs to offer. So if you think about this, where do you think that the Nordic cooperation is heading in the future? And where will we be in 70 years? It's almost 70 years now since the passport union. Where do you think we'll be in 70 years?
I'm afraid that there is a possibility that in 70 years, we speak English to each other.
Like we're doing now.
We don't watch each other's television programs, and we go south and west when we want to educate ourselves. This corona crisis has shown us how fragile Nordic cooperation is, because it's really at a low point right now. So we have to fight for it. And maybe the good thing about the corona crisis is that it has shown us how fragile it is and how we should make sure that we get up from this low point and that we realize all those options, possibilities, opportunities that we have as these 5 countries with very similar countries, very similar cultures, and so much to learn from each other.
Yes. Thank you so much, Bertel. We will move on now to the presentation of the report itself. But thank you so much for your introduction, and we look forward to seeing both what you will be doing as president of the Nordic Council, the parliamentarians, and also what the Finnish chairmanship of the Nordic Council of Ministers will come up with during this year. But thank you so much. Now I'd like to welcome the next 3 speakers, actually, who are people who have been involved with the report that we are launching today. And first round, we have Kaija Ruotsalainen, I think I get that right, who has been project lead. So before we get into more of the details over the results, Let's hear a little bit about the background and the process, Kaya. Welcome to you. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I have this one slide, so please, can you take the first page and the second one? Yes, this one. Thank you. Yes, good afternoon, dear participants. The free movement of persons between Nordic countries is an important part of common identity and strength of Nordic societies. This is something that has worked and has been developed over 5 decades. The borders of Nordic countries are possibly one of the most open and well-functioning borders in the world, but there are no exact statistical data on activities across the borders, such as working and studying. These are not included in the national statistical programs, and they are also quite difficult to produce. Therefore, when Finland last held the presidency of Nordic Council of Ministers in 2016, Finland launched a project which aim was to develop and produce cross-border statistics in the Nordic region. All the 5 Nordic countries and their statistical institutes participated in this project. Although there has been previous collection of Nordic cross-border statistics, there has never been a systematic data collection of this kind of statistics that covered all 5 Nordic countries. And the next slide, please. The project generated a model and a procedure for the exchange of microdata between countries in order to produce cross-border statistics. Based on this data exchange, matrices on commuting, migration, and attained education are published in the Nordic Statistics Database, and the results are also available in the report that is published today. In addition, the project also managed to verify that the data exchange increased the quality of national and European statistics. Improving the coverage of national education register is the most obvious result of that. Also, the data exchange gave us the possibility to evaluate the under-coverage of employed person in the official register-based employment statistics in each country. The underestimation varies from 0.04% in Norway and Finland to 0.86% in Sweden. Of course, the underestimation varies also between the region within each countries. And the next slide, please. The Nordic actors on both national and regional level have a big interest in continuous cross-border statistics. However, the legal obstacles to exchange data we faced during the project may prevent a full-scale production of Nordic cross-border statistics in the future. At the moment, the production of statistics based on data exchange seems not to be possible between Sweden and Denmark and Sweden and Norway. However, today, at this moment, I want to say this is a happy day. We have reached our target. We are publishing the results and the report. We did it, although we faced obstacles we were not able to foresee. Now it's time to celebrate. I would like to thank the wonderful project team that has worked for years for this project. My sincere and warm thanks, all of you. I hope that we will have possibility to celebrate this face-to-face sometimes in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaya. And thank you for all the work that has been done. So what was the most surprising result, you would say,
Most surprising. Perhaps the volume of educational data. I mean that how much there was information available in the education register of other countries. For example, those living in one country and the education exists in other countries' education register.
So
and
maybe
also,
Bertel, maybe he doesn't need to be so worried because there is still a lot of exchange of students in the region.
yes, but also it is because of the persons have migrated from other country another. It's also result for the movement of persons between country.
Yeah.
Not only that they are studied in one country.
You studied 3 areas actually. You studied mobility in general, cross-border mobility. You studied education, and you studied migration. But today we're not actually really going to hear much about the migration data. Why is that?
Maybe we couldn't produce migration data from all countries. That's one reason that it's not so interesting area, perhaps, because data exchange between Sweden and Denmark, Sweden and Norway was not possible concerning migration data.
So there are these obstacles that we mentioned earlier. We'll look more into that in the second hour of the program, but now we will actually have to move on to the next speaker, I think.
Okay.
Although there is a question from the audience. There was a question on what are the data between Denmark, Sweden and Norway, Sweden? Why are the data not being processed and shared? I think actually we will address this in the second part of the program. So maybe we shouldn't go too much into that now.
Yeah, maybe it's better because there is coming more discussion in this section. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. But thank you so much, Kaya. And we'll move on to the next speaker, who will talk about the data that the trends that we have seen in recent years related to mobility, cross-border mobility in its essence, so the people moving over the borders for work and so on. So welcome to you, Helge, from Statistics Norway. You will take us through some of the figures and some of the trends encountered here. So I'll give the floor to you.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to be here and to inform you about figures that you can't find in national statistics. So I just think we go on to the first slide. In 2015, there were about 51,000 cross-border commuters between the Nordic countries. How do we then define a cross-border commuter? It's a person registered as resident in one country while working for an employer in another country. This means they are crossing national borders on the way to work. And the crossing could be physically or by internet, or a combination of these two ways of crossing borders. What we have learned the last year is that working from home can be done to a much larger scale than have been done before. Why do then persons cross border to find work? Well, it may be obvious. Very often persons commute to find better job opportunities or higher wages in another country. And who are they? Well, we could put them in perhaps 3 main groups. It's those having short distance from home to place of work in a neighbor country. Or they could have working arrangements suitable for long distance traveling, which means they have intensive work periods and then many days off, which means that they do not have to go to work so frequently. Or it's, as I said, it could be a possibility to work from home, to be a digital commuter. Our data do not have direct information on why and who, but it gives some indications. What is then the overall picture of commuting between the Nordic countries. Next slide, please. Yes, I think we have still. Next slide, please. Here you see the blue bars gives the number of commuters leaving their home country, while the red bars shows the inflow of commuters to countries. The chart shows that all the Nordic countries have both inflow and outflow of commuters, but in numbers it is dominated by the outflow of commuters from Sweden to Norway and Denmark. These two flows of commuters are of very different nature. The flow from Sweden to Denmark is mostly persons resident in South Sweden, that is Skåne region, that travel to work in the Copenhagen region. The distance between these two regions are so short that it's possible to commute on a daily basis. And since both Skåne and Copenhagen are large urban regions, this explains the high number of commuters. The flow of commuters from Sweden to Norway comes from many different regions in Sweden and not only from border regions. These two countries have a long common border, but on both sides of the border it is dominated by rural areas, except for the south end of the border. So most of the commuters from Sweden do not commute on a daily basis. The figure I present are from 2015, but the commuting structure do not change very much from year to year over short periods. On the other hand, the absolute numbers goes up and down, partly because of changes in unemployment rates in the Nordic countries. As an example, from 2015 to 2019, the number of commuters from Sweden to Norway have been reduced from 21,000 to 14,000. The number of commuters represent only a small share of the total number of employees in the Nordic countries, as Kaja said. The highest share was for Sweden and then Iceland. But for some regions, the importance of commuters are much higher. Next slide, please. Here we have figures for the outflow of commuters as percent of the total number of resident employees in the different regions. And the regions are split in border and non-border municipalities. We have only specified regions with rates of at least 1%. Looking at the absolute number of commuters, we see that much of the regions are rural areas. The exception is South Sweden, which I mentioned earlier, that have Öresund as a border to Copenhagen. If we had looked at figures for each municipality, we would have even higher rates. In the Nordic database, there are no data on municipality level due to zero and very small numbers in many municipalities in some of the countries. But the data exists and can be ordered from the statistical institutes.
Helge, 1 minute.
Yes. Then some figures on the commuters by sex and age. Next slide, please. In the Nordic countries, more men than women are cross-country commuters. And the male rate among commuters are higher than the male rate among the total number of employees. Next slide, please. Here you have the age distribution among commuters by country of residence. And the left green bar are the youngest and the blue bar to the right are the oldest. And so you can see that it's the most of the commuters, the highest rate are among those 30 to 44 years old, but we are also a lot of commuters 51 years or more. Next slide, please. So far, we have looked at the commuting from the supply side of the labor market and the importance of commuting for employment in the resident population. But commuting also plays a role to meet the demand of labor from the employers. And this table gives the share of commuters compared to the share among non-commuting employees. It's an average for all the Nordic countries. For some of these industries, like transport and construction, long-distance commuting is a well-known phenomenon within each country as well. The relative high rate for human health and social work is well known for commuters traveling to work in Norway. Norway have shortage of health personnel like nurses, and commuters therefore plays an important role to meet the demand for labor. So my final statement is then cross-border commuters are important because it increases the flexibility of the Nordic labor market. Thank you.
Yes. I think it's interesting if you look at the figures. I think I'm returning to the screen in a second. If you look at the figures, it's interesting to see that from 2015 to 17, I believe the number of commuters went down from 51,000 to 45,000. So overall 10%. It's actually quite a lot. And as we said earlier, this predates Corona and all the other troubles. Of course, there were some issues around the refugee crisis and so on. But that was a trend that was already happening. And I believe maybe it was especially among young people. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, I think the main reason to the downturn in the commuters from Sweden to Norway should be seen in context with the unemployment situation. In that period, the unemployment in Sweden went down, while in Norway, for some of these years, it went up. So I think that's the main reason.
Okay, so it's what I mentioned before, that these economic fluctuations, in a way, that how we help out each other on the labor market, so to speak.
Yes, because especially young people who goes from school and want to have work, they if it's a high unemployment, they have a problem with getting a job, and then they are perhaps more mobile, they have no family and so forth, so that it's easier to move to another country then.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I'm afraid we don't have any more time now. We have to move on to the next presentation. But thank you so much, Helge, for your insight into some of the more recent trends. And of course, we hope it will be possible to update some of these figures to the present soon. But we'll get back to that. Thank you so much. And now I would like to welcome the next speaker, who is also from Statistics Norway. Anne-Marie, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, welcome, Anne-Marie. You will talk a little bit about the results that you had from the studies on education mobility. So please, the floor is yours. I will say when you have 1 minute left.
Okay, thank you. Can you put on my PowerPoint, please? The next slide.
Next slide.
Next one. One could say that there are different kinds of mobility connected to education. We have those who move from one country to another to study, either to take a few credits or to stay for a longer period, for instance, to achieve a bachelor or a master's degree. And in addition, there are also those who move between the Nordic countries for other reasons, for instance, to work or get married, and who bring with them their education. The first group, students who cross borders between the Nordic countries, is already described in matrices in the Nordic Statistics database. Next, please. When talking about mobility in this presentation, the focus will be on residents in each country at the end of December 2018 who have a registered highest education attained from the other Nordic countries. This includes both immigrants from the other countries who bring with them an education, and also qualifications attained in the Nordic countries by the national population. How many have attained an education from another country? Where do they have their education from? And what kind of educations are we talking about? The yellow bars in this figure tells us that both in Denmark, Finland, and Norway, most residents have an attained education from Sweden, while in Iceland, most and also a lot of those in Norway have an education from Denmark. Among residents in Sweden, the black column shows that most have attained an education in Finland. The most important explanatory factor for the high number from Finland is the earlier high migration rate from Finland to Sweden. Next, please. In this figure, the blue columns show that in all countries except Iceland, the majority with an education from the other Nordic countries have attained an education at upper or post-secondary level, while in Iceland, most have attained a bachelor or a master's degree. When we looked at student data exchanged in the Nordic Mobility Project, we found that a lot of students from other Nordic countries who stay in the country of study for a longer period, they also register as residents in the country of study while studying. They are only temporary residents in the country, and many have an education at upper secondary level. This affects the numbers for all countries, but especially for the countries with a lot of students from the other Nordic countries, such as Denmark and Sweden. More key results concerning the data exchange for each of the Nordic countries can be found in the report and also in the Nordic Statistics database. Next, please. One very important secondary aim in this project has been to improve the coverage of the national registers on educational attainment of the population. The statistical institutes, we do not receive enough information about education attained by immigrants from the other Nordic countries, nor in some cases the qualifications attained in these countries by the national population. This problem has been addressed with data collections, but these collections are expensive and often have a low response rate. The free movement of persons between the Nordic countries makes it especially challenging to collect this information from registers. But through the exchange of microdata in this project, we have been able to receive and store more and better data. Information about the education of as much as almost 842,000 people were exchanged. Qualifications would only be updated in the national registers if the level of education in the information received was higher than the existing information, or information about education was missing for the person in the national register. As Kaja talked about, all countries have not been able to store information exchanged with all the other countries in the registers due to different legal circumstances, but all registers have been or will be updated at least with information from some of the countries. Next, please. What this table shows is possible updates in each of the countries' registers for the Nordic population and the total population in December 2018, if the legal challenges were solved and we had been able to store all new information exchanged.
1 minute, Anne-Marie.
Okay. The column in the middle shows the result for residents in each country with a citizenship from another Nordic country, while the column to the right shows the effect on the coverage of the total population. As you can see, Denmark and Iceland had the largest share of updates for those with a citizenship from another country, as much as 38.7% and 31.5%. As already mentioned, Denmark has a large amount of students from the other countries who are registered as residents in Denmark while studying, which contributes to the high share of possible updates. While a reason for the high share for Iceland is that the register of educational attainment of the population is relatively new. But for all countries, the share of possible updates is quite large, as some countries updated the education registers not only for the population in 2018, but also retrospectively. Comparison can also be made to the population having sometimes lived in the country. Next, please. The results from the project shows that the data exchange greatly improves the knowledge about the education of the residents in each country who have attained an education in another Nordic country. Register data is of better quality than information given in surveys, and as mentioned, surveys are expensive and often have low response rates. Information about persons' highest attained education is not only used in education statistics, but is also essential information used as a data source in several other statistic areas. A procedure for exchange of microdata has now been generated in this project, and the effect of a regular microdata exchange in the future, where the legal issues have been solved, will secure a much better register material, which again leads to better statistics in each of the countries than what is the case today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. You mentioned microdata a couple of times, and this is something that we will come back to in the second half of the program, because, as you say, that's the most reliable data we have. But often there are problems exchanging it, and there are privacy issues, and so on. But we will get back to that discussion in the second half, as I said. But just briefly, you mentioned that you actually managed to fill a lot of the gaps that we talked about. So. All these updates that you mentioned, is that in a way putting light on the dark numbers, if you can put it that way? It would just, I mean, you succeeded in actually finding a lot of information that was not known before.
Yes, we did. I think it was a great success, but it would have been an even greater success if we were able to exchange data between Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Sweden, of course. I can, as an example, I can say that before the data exchange, more than 30% of the immigrants from the other Nordic countries had missing education information in the Norwegian register. But after the data exchange, it went down to 17%, and less than 10% for all countries except Sweden. So if we were able to get data from Sweden, it would be a lot lower than 17. Too.
Yes. So this actually has an impact on people's lives and how they are perceived, not just in the statistics, but also in reality, and how easy it is for them to get a foothold.
Yes, you could say that.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much. We will move on now to the next part of the program. As Helge mentioned, all the statistics, apart from what you can find in the report, you can also explore the Nordic Statistics database, of course, in itself, and you can ask for specific kinds of information from the statistics agencies. And our next two guests, I think, are people who might well do that, because they represent two of our border committees. We would like to show the map of the border committees briefly before we move on. We have a number of border committees in the Nordic region, as you see on this map, and they are supported by the Nordic Council of Ministers and by the Nordic Cooperation, and they work with issues dealing with cross-border mobility, among other things. So I would like to welcome two of the representatives of these committees. We have Paula Mikkola from the North Callot, which is the big purple area at the top of the map. And then we have Elsie Hellström from Svinesund that actually Bertel mentioned in his presentation. So could you please? Yes. I would like to see all three of us. Thank you. Yes. Hello, Elsie. Welcome. And Paula, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now you've listened to some of the results of this report, and you are, I guess, some of the main receivers of this information. What is your first reaction, Elsie?
Thank you for the possibility to
Oh, there's something with your voice. You sound like a...
Okay, it's better now? It's better now?
It's clear.
Yeah,
You hear me now?
Yes, yes. You sounded like something from a horror movie.
Yes, you don't know. Okay.
Your first reaction.
As I said, yes, my first action is to say thank you for the possibility to comment on this report. And I also will say that this is a big step forward. For many years, we have asked for this, and of course, it don't solve the the problems as the speakers before has told us, but we now see the problems, and we also can perhaps find ways to go further on. So I think this is a good step forward. During the years, it has been several Interreg projects with good results, but the problems has been that no one national level has wanted to see or solve the problems long term. And also, as the reports say, it's a lack of political will and financing. And that I think is very important. And also, as Mr. Bertil Harder said in the beginning, it's a political will. And I think we must focus on that.
Yes, actually, I just saw today that the Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg and Swedish Prime Minister will be meeting next week to discuss the plight of the border commuters especially along the Swedish-Norwegian border, of course. But I know that the Norwegian Minister of Labour, he's also said that the issue is crucial with regards to Finland and to commuters there. So it seems that there is tension, and these are, of course, developments that have been caused by the corona pandemic and the issues that they have to deal with because of that. But we can say maybe we should send them a note saying, well, okay, but maybe you don't quite know what you're talking about because we don't have all the figures, but at least we have made some steps forward. What would you say, Paula?
I would say that it is an impressive achievement that you have been able to combine statistics from all 5 countries. I also found an old report from 2012, which was the former effort to try to produce statistics, and then there were only 3 countries involved. So we didn't succeed in getting all the ones. While reading the report, I was thinking that are the requests that cross-border organizations have put forward, are they too high or unrealistic? Because it is such an effort to produce or serve on a national level, and if we require data on a regional or local level.
What kind of requests have you put forward, Paula, and you and the other committees?
Well, the information that we need is that not only sort of commuting or sort of educational or students who move abroad, but there is also, we need things about, well, regions of inhabitants or in general, well, that we get from the demographic statistics, but then sort of accumulation of wages, what kind of, it has I think that Bertil was already on this, that how much do the wage differences affect, or the costs of living in general, because that has also an effect on the tendency of people moving across borders.
So you miss more detailed statistics, more detailed information. I know from Kaya, and also I think from the report that during the process, because this project was postponed, there was these issues with exchanging data that we will address in the second hour, and that's why it took so long. So it's been a really complicated task, although you'd think that we're the most integrated region in the world. That's what we say anyway. So you'd think it was easier, but I know that just to do the work that they did for the report, they had to make 50 separate agreements between the different statistics agencies in the countries. So clearly this is really complicated. But what are you what more are you missing? You know, I mean, how could we do it better? Elsie, what do you think?
I first would like to say that I think it shows the weak national interest that exists for border regions and their opportunity and threat. And we also have seen that during the last year. And I think national decisions it has caused a great damage in the cross-border labor and markets and for individual cross-border commuters. And I talked with a colleague in one of the municipalities, and she said, yes, if we don't know the numbers, how shall they could act on the national level? They are not living here and not see the situation. So in many ways, I think with good statistics is, yes, it's very, very important for the region or the cross-border regions, and also to lift up just the possibilities that we have in these regions, but we can't show them. We have no statistics.
So do you feel that you as border regions, you are forgotten by your governments, or you're forgotten in the bigger picture?
Yes, also forgotten, perhaps it's a too big word, but I think we must set more focus on the border regions, and especially the national level must see what affects the decisions they do or not do in the cross-border regions. And I just read today a report from EU that mentioned the same thing and focused on the same thing. We must get better to have statistics and knowledge about the cross-border regions. It's a possibility in our areas. And we also miss, I would say, what we miss, I think they have focused on the right statistics in this report. I don't think it was possible to do much more, but we also see, of course, the income situation, and one, if you see in the cross-border regions, you also have a big exchange in culture and in sport, and it's also interesting to see what it's like in figures, so to speak, in these areas. So yes, it's a lot more, but it's a good start.
And Paula, you also you represent not just 2 borders but 3. It's both Finland, Norway, and Sweden, and there's also the whole Lapland region. So does that? What is your impression for that dimension? You know, what kind of problems do some of the people up there encounter?
Well, it's at the moment, if we don't take the normal situation, it is sort of people are all the restrictions that have been put into force. They change our daily lives, because we are so few. We have to rely on getting services across the borders and joining forces, as we are so few. And that is not possible. And we are a bit concerned also here on what Bertel was up to also in his speech, that how will this affect the willingness to create or work across the borders? Do the employers want to hire people from abroad, from the neighboring countries? Because there's a risk, which has been sort of become relevant now. People can't get to their work. So in a sense, it has made it was highlighted again many of the problems that haven't been solved, so to say.
Yes, and maybe these problems are actually bigger than we know, because, as I said in the beginning, we don't have the full picture, we don't have all the data, but we have taken a step forward at least now. Now we will take a step forward into a 5-minute break so that people can stretch their legs. And after the break, we will actually, you mentioned the EU, Elsie, we will have a presentation looking at the EU level, and we'll have discussions with 2 panels as to why this is so important. Why is it important that we have the right numbers? What are the consequences of not having them? The real life consequences for real life people, and also what can we do to improve this, and also again what are some of the legal issues that we are facing. So we'll have a 5-minute break now. We'll be back at 2 o'clock, and look forward to this discussions there. Thank you so much for following us so far.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the second half of our program discussing mobility in the Nordic region and Nordic cooperation as well. In this second hour, we'll first have a European outlook, followed by two panel discussions. The first one will focus on why it's so important that we have this kind of data exchange and this cooperation on sharing data across borders so that we get a better picture of what's actually happening. And secondly, a panel discussing how we can get better at this. So let's start out first round with the first speaker, Johan van der Valk from Statistics Netherlands. Welcome, Johan.
Hello.
And
good afternoon.
You represent a European network trying to tie closer links between statistics agencies, a network that we are actually not part of up here in the Nordic region. So bring it on and let us hear more about this.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be able to talk with you about this. There was, I heard already a lot of points of making going north instead of going south. Let me be the bridge to the rest of Europe. Okay, so the first slide, please.
Left, Johan.
Sorry?
I will say when you have 2 minutes left.
Oh, yeah, sure. I will talk about the situation in the European Union regarding cross-border statistics. First slide, please. Second one then, okay. Yeah, so I work at Statistics Netherlands for a couple of years. I'm dealing with trying to develop cross-border statistics. Next slide, please. So the situation is that we have carried out two Interact projects, one with in the program of the border with Germany and the other with the border of Belgium, and we focused on labor market data, and this resulted in an open data portal that we launched in the end of 2018. And at the state of play is that we are currently discussing with the ministries how to make this a sustainable system and how to update the data in the portal. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, here's a screenshot of our portal. You can have a look at it. This is the screen where you can make tables. So next slide, please, is the screen where you are able, where one can download the open data in a machine readable format. This and the data, the portal is in German and in Dutch. Next slide, please. When you start developing cross-border statistics with Germany, then you use German data, and then you get automatically the issue that Germany is interested in these indicators as well. But Germany borders not only with the Netherlands, but also with France, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Poland, and Denmark. And Germany has a really interest in having statistics that are comparable within Germany, for the whole of Germany, with all their bordering countries. So you start developing statistics for two countries, but since you have Germany on your side, you automatically have an idea that you have to discuss with other, have to think about how to harmonize things at European level. Next slide, please. And a German institute in the BBSR, a German Planning Institute, a federal institute, was very interested is interested in having a cross-border observations, and so we were meeting with them, and they launched this network on cross-border monitoring, and this was founded at the end of 2019, and The idea was that this that we have that we have set the same issues for all kinds of countries, where and it makes sense to combine resources. The goals are that we aim to improve territorial monitoring in cross-border areas, facilitate the access to cross-border data, and foster the development of cross-border statistics, because they are not straightforward, as was mentioned before in the first hour as well. Next slide, please. So here are the countries that are part of the network. So 18 members, both statistical institutes, but also cross-border organizations, so more so users. So it's a network of both users of cross-border statistics and statistical offices. It is focused more or less, as you can see. So Germany is there, and France is there, Poland, Switzerland, and Austria, and the Netherlands and Luxembourg. These are the countries that are covered. As you can see, we do not cover the whole of Europe, but it is an oil stain that is already a large part of the European Union. Next slide, please. So we have this view that we think that statistical institutes should have should make core cross-border statistics as part of their core business. It makes sense. The methods must be harmonized internationally. Statistical institutes already have do this kind of work. It is efficient because you can make use of the expertise of those institutes. You want to have a sustainable system. That's exactly what statistical institutes are doing. And not unimportantly, it is also relevant for national users. We say that the country should stop depicting a country as an island and make clear that there is a world also across the border. And last but not least, it fits into the mandate of the European statistical system, which covers all statistical institutes of Europe and Eurostat, the Statistical Office of the European Commission. However, it is extra work. So currently they are not doing this kind of work. So it's extra work. So statistical institutes need extra resources. We think that these resources should be made available within the national statistical systems. Next slide, please. What is our strategy? We think that you should make cross-border statistics, making making use of existing data and existing infrastructure. So the infrastructure is the European statistical system and the cooperation that is already there with statistical officers. And the data, very importantly, we think that you should make use of the existing data. And then one of the major sources, as we see it, and it fits perfectly with you, is make use of registers. So registers and partly European surveys, but they are not very helpful. So mainly registers, we think that should be made use of. The other thing is that we would like to do it in a constructive, positive way. So we start with a small group of motivated statistical institutes, and that's one. And then we work to show what is possible. We cooperate with stakeholders and all relevant international organizations like Eurostat, European Commission, and other. We should align with other initiatives. There are many things like your initiative that we are currently talking about, and we would like to meet once a year to exchange practices and see how far we are. Next slide, please. The network is just starting up, so we are looking for people for countries to join us. I would like to have much more statistical institutes on board. One of the things that are highest on my priority list are that the Nordic countries join our network, but also users of cross-border data we would like to have on board. And we ask authorities to mobilize national institutes to join us. We have we just work going along with what is all needed, and very importantly, we have direct communication with the DG Regio of the European Commission in Brussels, the cross-border cooperation unit, and Eurostat. So we talk with them on a regular basis and harmonize or coordinate our activities with them.
1 minute, Johan.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. That is my summary. You are not alone. Although you are in the north of Europe, you are not so very differently from us in the south. I do not consider myself at the south, but let's say more southern than you. The cross-border statistics are important everywhere. I think there's a task for statistical institutes to produce them, and it is possible for them to do it on a cost-effective way. And we have, and the best way is that we cooperate with each other in order to make this happen. That is my presentation.
Thank you so much, Johan. Thank you. I like your picture of all the islands. Although it's sad to think that we are in a way we are islands. We are part of this community, and still, at least when it comes to statistics and sharing information with each other, we are all very separate. So what do you think that? How do you think the Nordics compare to the rest of Europe in this respect?
Well, I think so. We always look up to the Nordic countries because of their good cooperation, that they are so good in understanding each other's languages. And since for specific cross-border information, the use of registers is essential, and the Nordic countries have most experience in the use of registers.
Yeah,
so that is what where we can learn from you. I also think that you can maybe that we can be useful for you because we do not exchange the data, and still we are able to produce some cross-border statistics. So I think there is possibility to do it like that. Also, if we join forces, we can together we can find out what is the most efficient way of doing it, and harmonize the method. And that's very powerful if we have European coordinated definitions. So for instance, the definition that Helge presented is perfectly fine for me. So I think we can already start, we can present this. And that brings me to the last point, is that we have a direct link with the European Union, the Commission. So if you join us, we can have this conversation at the European level.
Yeah, I think that the Nordic countries are probably the ones, as you say, with the best registers. We have registered data going back to the 1970s, so 50 years. But at the same time, a lot of what is at stake here are issues around privacy. And we mentioned this notion of microdata, and that's something we're going to discuss more in this part of the program. So microdata is actually personal information about someone, and it's often quite sensitive to share this data. So this is something that I guess you have encountered as well.
Yes, but we do not exchange data. So we cooperate with Germany, and in Germany it's it's really impossible even within Germany to exchange data. And so we found a way of doing this. And this is possible. So my proposal would be, of course, it is good that you try to exchange data, but you can also do a lot without exchanging data, making use of the information that are available in the register.
Okay.
But work on both lines, I would say.
So you have some tricks of the trade. You'll join us in a later panel to discuss how we can improve our cooperation. So maybe you can give us some tricks when you come back. Now I would like to thank you for your presentation and move on to the next panel. And here we are joined by Kimmo Sassi, who is the current chair of the Nordic Freedom of Movement Council. We will have Ulrika Geratz, who is development director of Region Skåne in southern Sweden, next to Copenhagen, where we actually are now, where our studio is. And finally, we have Rolf Elmir, who is a new director at Nordregio, who is the Nordic Council Ministers institution for research on regional development and planning. So first of all, Kimmo, I would like to welcome you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You are chair of the Freedom of Movement Council, which is a body under the Nordic Council of Ministers. So what is your take on what you've heard so far? What are the implications from your perspective, not just on the freedom of movement, but also on what information we have about the freedom of movement?
So I'm very happy that we have the report in our hands at the moment. And I have followed the writing of the report. And as we know, so there have been a lot of obstacles on the way, problems in changing information between some countries. And it has not been possible to exchange information only through bilateral contracts, but you have needed also the European Union system. And this somehow shows that we have a lot of things to do in the Nordic countries to become the most integrated area in the world. And that is very important that, okay, this is the first report, but we need in the future following reports as well. And I think the infrastructure, how to write them, how to get the information must be changed so that can be done as easily as just possible. But of course, the facts are very important. And now we have a lot of facts of people commuting, working in other Nordic country, and also of students. And I think that information is very useful for us. And of course, for our work, the aim of the Mobility Council is to try to avoid future obstacles. And if there are obstacles today, try to erode them, take them away through political process. And now, okay, this report shows some problems, but for us that's therefore very important as well, that now those problems we have in our file, now we can see how important they are. If you see that there could be thousands of people that are attached with those problems, so then it means that we have to increase our efforts to try to solve them. So that is very important for our work. And then, of course, one can say that when new problems arrive to our table, so then when we have the statistics, so we can estimate how important the problem is. And I think all decisions should be made on the basis of facts. So I think this is a very important tool for our work.
Yes.
And also when we speak with ministers, so they always ask, how important is this question? And then we can say that, okay, there are so many people commuting in this area, meeting this problem, and then if there are many people, so then it means that there's more political pressure for the work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kimmo. We will be joining the rest of the panel shortly, but let me first introduce Ulrika. Ulrika, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, hello and welcome. You are working in Region Skåne, which is one of the parts of Sweden that is most heavily affected or influenced by border commuting. And I know that you have been wanting very much, you've been looking forward to this report, and you still have some concerns about the future of our cooperation. But in terms of exchanging data, in terms of getting the full picture, as we have discussed, so what does it mean to you in your everyday work that you don't actually have the facts that Kimmo just mentioned. You don't actually have the facts that you need to take your decisions.
Well, I think it influences a lot, just as Kimmo said. If we don't have the knowledge of how many people are commuting, or what is the potential growth that we can see in this area, we cannot make policies that are justified or correct. And just to give an example, for example, in Region Skåne, we work together in what we call the Greater Copenhagen Committee, which is a collaboration with 4 regions, 2 on the Swedish side, 2 on the Danish, and 85 municipalities. Obviously, we want to attract foreign investments. We want to attract foreign competencies that are vital to our, for example, the life science area, the gaming industry that is big. In order to do that, we need to have the correct information. But we also need it in order to have a good understanding with our national level. Sometimes, due to the fact that we don't have the statistics, we end up in situations where, for example, the Swedish people that work on the Danish side, their income is not shown in the Swedish national statistics. That means that a city like Malmö has a higher rate of child poverty. Obviously, there are some child poverty in Malmö, but not all of that is not related to actual poverty. It's it becomes like that because if you have 1 or 2 parents who are working on the Danish side, those children live in a low-income family.
And what effect does that have on your management of the region?
What can happen is that both national level and also regional, and the city of Malmö in this case, that they can make policies based on the wrong information, which is obviously not the way we want to handle tax money. And another thing, last week I was involved in the making decisions on testing because we are in a pandemic, and the Swedish and the Danish side on a national level are making quick decisions. And we have a number of children that have 1 Danish parent and 1 Swedish parent, and but the family has split up. And we needed to make a decision very quickly on are we going to offer free testing for these families, and how do we do this, and how do we arrange that? Obviously, when you want to make those quick decisions, you want to have the information. How many children are we talking about? How many families are affected? How many are commuting? And it was quite difficult to get that information on a short notice. So I see that there is, both in the short term, we need to have the information to make good assessments in quick decisions, but we also need it for long term. And another challenge in this is, for example, we are part of the Interreg region with the Kattegat, Skagerrak, the ÖKS region with Sweden, Denmark, and Norway together. We have difficulty in evaluating these projects because they are happening in 3 different countries. And just to give an example, what kind of money are we talking about? Only in the ÖKS program, it's 127.6 million euros. So obviously we are interested in seeing, are these projects giving us the growth and the effects that we want? So to me, it's essential that we have a way of handling statistics. And you started out saying in this program that we actually saw less people commuting already before the pandemic, that we've seen a lack or a lower amount of a decrease. Yeah. And I think that, we had the refugee crisis, and then we had this, that the Danish, they closed the border because of crime rates in the Swedish side, and then the Swedish did the same back, and now we have the pandemic. I think all these things have a cultural impact. That is negative when you open and close the borders, because people need, they need to understand what is happening. You need to know how the different system works, that you are able to commute, that you can have a job in one country and work in the other.
You need to have trust. I mean, we like to say that trust is the I think the Nordic Council of Ministers made a report on that. Trust the Nordic gold, but maybe there is some lack of trust also at times. Finally, a final question before we move on. You also work, as you mentioned, you work in the greater Copenhagen region. You work to bridge the Øresund, so to speak. And how is your work affected here? We will also have actually a representative in the next panel who has worked with these issues, but just a few words from you.
Well, I think we've actually increased our numbers of meetings just because there has been so many challenges when it comes to for our commuters. Obviously, like we saw in the graphs earlier, there are a lot more people from Sweden that commute to Denmark than the opposite. But one problem that has occurred is that Danish people that work in Sweden, when they now had to stay at home physically, then they had more than 180 days in Denmark, and then they got a different tax rate. So suddenly they had to pay more in tax, and so you know, that's also something that no one knew. And also there's different tax levels on whether you work in the public or the private sector, which actually no one knew, no one on the Swedish or the Danish side. Yeah. I think unfortunately we haven't been able to see each other as often as we did before, but we have had an increased amount of meetings just because there's been so many issues regarding the pandemic and the closed borders.
So you can say modern life is complex. You don't always have all the information, and a crisis like Corona, of course, just exacerbates the need to have the right information, to need to know what's actually going on. And now we'll move on to the next speaker before we'll join all of you in a short panel. We have Rolf Ilmer from Nordic Region. Hello, Rolf. Nice background. My old workplace in Stockholm. Yes. Nice to see. Welcome to you. And you've heard our discussion here. So you're working with research and producing what we would like to think, at least, are facts and figures. So what is your take on this? How big a problem is this?
So this report is a very interesting or good first step, I would say. It highlights some of the issues, the legal issues, the coordination issues between the countries, which has been addressed moving forward. But as you said, we are a research institute for regional development and planning, and actually the granularity of the data is not to that level, so we can see actually the migration patterns, the mobility from the different regions. So I would say that the next step is of course to further the data, so we can actually go down and really study what happens in different regions, in the Västra Götalands region, in Halland, in Skåne, for example, between the borders. We need also more frequent updates. I think the next steps here is to, like Berto said, we need some political will to go forward. And we heard earlier in this presentation that if you look at the national level, you could benefit greatly in the educational sector to get better statistics. So I think if we move forward to get more granularity, more data on this mobility and integration paths, we will also improve the national statistics. So I think it's in national interest that we further this and always come back to highlight the integration in the Nordic sector, because we want to follow up on and do research on the Nordic integration. So then we need better data.
As we heard from Elsie and Paula from the border committees, I mean, the devil is often in the details, of course, and we don't have the details. As you say, we don't maybe have the information, especially on the regional level, because, of course, the national decision makers are national and they think at the bigger picture. But actually, I would say that the regional level and the local level is where real life unfolds. Yes. And that's what we would like to see reflected in these figures. So maybe now I could welcome back Kimmo and Ulrika before we move on to the next panel. Because there's something that I've been wondering about in this project. How much does statistics actually I mean, we would like to think that reality is reflected in the statistics, but how much do statistics actually affect reality? If you look at it the other way around, Ulrika, what do you think?
I would say it has a, I would like to say that when we suggest decision making for our politicians, we base that on the statistics at hand. And sometimes, if you don't have that statistics that you would like to have, you have to do with, the best you can. But for us, whether it's about suggesting new infrastructure, like a new tunnel between Helsingborg, Helsingør, or if it's about creating job opportunities for young people on the Swedish side working in Denmark, for example, those initiatives and those suggestions should be based on statistics. I would say that that's what we always try to do, but it has been more difficult to find that statistics and to do it and analyze the numbers that we have, because sometimes you end up when you don't have that, you can if you're unlucky, you compare apples and pears. I think we've felt that until 2013, 2014, we had quite a good statistic base in the Öresund region. And since then, we're working very closely with our colleagues on the Danish side and trying to work with all different parties that have information and knowledge in this field. But we need to come to a better situation where we can exchange data in a better way.
Things have gone downhill in the last years. That's sad to hear. But Kimmo, what would you say? These dark numbers that we're talking about, do they actually also have an effect in their own right on the freedom of movement?
Well, certainly they have. So if we find a problem and we get our problems through Northern info services and then services advising people at the border. And then when we look at a problem, so we try to see the core of the problem, and then we go to a minister, for example, and explain there's a problem. So then we have to explain the problem. And then the second question usually is this a big problem? And then if you can explain, this is an important question, it's a big problem, it concerns a lot of people. So then it gives certain political push and sincerity for the problem. And of course, today, in fact, well, if you make very good memorandum, so you must have some statistics there to be convincing in all cases. So, and in fact, there's a lot of information today, and it is used in almost all discussions. So
you have to be able to make your case. So Rolf, what should we do? Should we ask Nordregio to do more studies, or how do we solve this problem?
I think we have to improve the data, because we would love to do more research on these subjects, on the migration between countries and so on. But we need to have actually good data, because the research is not better than the data we get in. So I would say that we really need this. We want to study the mobility patterns further down in a more regional level. I think that's very important to have that improvement in the statistics.
So this is really a part of the lifeline of Nordic cooperation in a sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much to all of you. We have to move on now, unfortunately. But thank you for joining us today and sharing your views. We'll move on to the next speaker now, who will try to enlighten us a little bit about some of the legal issues. We've talked a lot about this microdata, register data, exchange of data, and of course statistics is based on knowing the facts or what we think are the facts. we used to, as Johan also pointed out, we often used to doing that within the national border. We're used to doing that as an island. So, and even this project, despite the tradition of Nordic cooperation, ran into a lot of problems, legal problems and legal issues that made it difficult to collect the data. So Anna-Sophie, I would like to welcome you. And leave the floor to you. You are representing Info Norden, which is the Nordic Council of Ministers information service, and you work a lot with commuters and people asking questions about what to do when they move from one country to another. So could you enlighten us a little bit about the legal issues? I will leave the floor to you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank everybody who is presenting here today, because it's really interesting. And I think the Nordic Mobility Project must be the most anticipated project in the history of the Nordic Council of Ministers. I know we are quite a lot of people who've been looking forward to it, so it's very exciting to listen to your results now. The Nordic region is way more integrated than we might have been aware of. The corona pandemic has made that really clear. People live their lives as if the Nordic countries is already one region, not just in the border areas, but all across the Nordic countries. As you all know, cross-border statistics between the Nordic countries are highly desirable to ensure proper statistics as a sound basis for policy making between the Nordic countries. We know that more Danes commute to work in Norway than to Sweden. We know that Icelanders commute to work in Norway on a regular basis. We know that people commute for work and studies across large areas, even between the Nordic capitals. But we just don't always know the specific numbers, and that is problematic. The Nordic Statistical Institutes have in the previous years, as we've heard before, exchanged individual microdata across borders, for example, on education status, labor market status, and so on. And this, I guess, has been quite unique, both because we have great registers with information to share, unlike many other countries, as Johan mentioned, but also because we actually did share the information with each other. We trusted each other with valuable information about our citizens. So even though the Nordic countries are very similar, they're also very different. Through this pandemic, we've been used to sort of seeing Sweden as the odd one out, but Sweden really isn't odd. Sweden is just different sometimes, just as the other Nordic countries are from time to time. And in this aspect, Sweden differs when it comes to handling personal data, since Sweden is very transparent with data compared to the other Nordic countries. And I think this is something a lot of you have touched upon. So I guess Sweden has a different way of handling further release of data compared to the other Nordic countries. In Sweden, all data that any public authority has in its possession is possible to be released further if there are grounds for the data release. So as I have understood it, this means that after the data is released to Statistics Sweden from the other Nordic countries, it can be released further to third parties without permission from the original data owner. That is, without permission from the other Nordic statistical institutes. So I guess that's sort of where the issue is. The other Nordic countries have a different practice, especially I think Denmark and Norway. The ownership of the statistical data remains with the original statistical institute. And if a third party wants to use the same data, the statistical institute can grant permission to do so. So as I understand it, the Nordic Mobility Project has sought to find a way around this and establish new procedures to exchange the data. But the project group, I think, was advised to follow the EU regulation on the exchange of data, securing the scope of use and the confidentiality of personal information. So what I would really like to know is this a path to follow in the future as the EU regulation differs from the Swedish national legislation? And is it at all realistic to base the exchange of microdata on a common set of rules from the EU regulation that partly differs from the national legislation in Sweden? Right now, we only have access to quite old data. And since we're working for the Nordic countries to be the most integrated region in the world, we will need updated cross-border statistics for policymaking and for getting a clear picture of the Nordic mobility between all the Nordic countries, not just across border regions, but really all across the Nordic countries. And I know that this project has really put the spotlight on the fact that there are differences in the way our countries handle microdata. So can we count on the politicians and the Statistical Institute and the Nordic Council of Ministers to resolve this cross-border obstacle? Because that is really what it is. And are all the Nordic countries committed to providing cross-border statistics in the future on a regular basis? Because I think it was Paula who mentioned that it had been some years ago since we had some data the last time, and I think we need it on a regular basis to really make it work. So what can Sweden do to make sure that the other Nordic countries will share their microdata with Sweden? And what can the other Nordic countries do to make it happen? So simply put, will you guys find a way forward and enable a future long-term production of very much needed cross-border statistics?
Thank you so much, Anna-Sofia. And that actually is a bridge to our next panel, where we will have a representative from Statistics Sweden. So thank you to you. Just briefly, I would say you work with Inflow Nord and you are in touch with lots of Nordic citizens. What do you think is the trend of Nordic mobility? What do you foresee for the future?
Actually, I think it was Ulrika from Skåne who talked about it. I think the whole thing with the cultural impact is so much bigger right now than we actually understand. So, because would you really dare to let your ex-partner take your child into another country if you're not sure you can come and visit? Are you sure you can buy a house if you cannot come in to visit your own house? Can you take that job or that education in another country? I think that's extremely important right now, because I'm not sure I would do that if I wasn't sure I could get into the country. And that is, so I think the whole, what is the whole integrated, what does it mean to have an integrated region, and what does citizenship means? Yeah. And it's really that important, because it is right now and it has never been before.
Yeah, and of course we cannot answer these questions. That's a whole different program, and that's a whole different project. Yes. But thank you for that perspective. And we'll move on to the next panel now, where I would like to introduce, first of all, Jens Olin, who's Deputy Director of the Director's Office at Statistics Sweden, and Pernille Stender, who's Chief Advisor at Statistics Denmark. And then we would welcome back also Johan van der Valk from Statistics Netherlands. But first, I would like to welcome you, Jens. Are you there?
I'm here.
Yes. Yep. And don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to solve the corona crisis or you know, anything like that, and the whole future of the Nordic cooperation. So maybe we should just focus now on how we get better at actually working together on exchanging data and on establishing what is actually our common reality. Mm-hmm. And as Anna-Sofie mentioned, Sweden has a different practice from the other Nordic countries, and that has turned out to be a big problem in this problem, and that made it a delay of several years, actually. Mm-hmm. Could you expand a little on that? Why is it the way it is?
Well, I can say some words on that, and I think the legal issues has been a major challenge for the project, and it was an issue for what we call the legal group, and that is representatives from our legal service at our Nordic National Statistical Institutes. And they worked very hard and thoroughly to find a solution to these issues. But it was unfortunately not possible to find a common view or position regarding the possibility to exchange microdata based on national legislation, at least not between Denmark and Sweden and Norway and Sweden. I should say that, for that is a specific case between our three countries. And it's correct to say that we have a different legal system in our countries. And Anna-Sofia described the main differences between us when another authority wants access to data. But I would like to add there at least that it is not as release data, and there are no obligations to that, but because we have the secrecy provisions that are transferred to that authority. So data that Statistics Sweden may receive from, for instance, another NSI has a very strong level of protection, both at Statistics Sweden and if the data is passed on. So from our point of view, there are no practical differences in comparison to the originated control provision that is included in the European statistical law.
So you think that your neighboring countries are overreacting?
Yeah, I wouldn't put it that way, but I would quote Bertil Harder at least. I think that he said in the beginning there that this is signed as a matter of recognition and not harmonization. And our opinion is that this is a matter of recognition, but we are discussing these issues. That it's
a matter of recognition. You mean recognizing each other's differences, or?
Yes, this is something that is not that. It is a difference, but it's not that. It doesn't in the end mean that much when it comes to this issue by releasing data, and that we don't have. Also, from our point of view, the comparison to an originated control provision that is included in the European statistical law, in practice, that the difference isn't that great. So
when you talk about the privacy issues, you're not so concerned about, but the openness in Sweden, it shouldn't really affect the privacy.
Okay, yes, and I think. I think it's an important statement, at least to say that there is a strong level of protection of data when we. But I would like to take the opportunity also then to comment on there is a proposal of harmonization in the project report. They suggest that we should align our national legislation to European legislation.
Yes, exactly.
And I think anyway to clarify which type of legislation that we are discussing, I'd like to at least mention that if we're going to change our laws, we are discussing the fundamental law, the Freedom of Press Act, and the fundamental rules of public access to official documents and the Secrecy Act, and this was also mentioned before, but it would obviously not be a straightforward process.
So this is really the Swedish hard blood. It's very at the core of your constitution, really.
Yes, it is.
So what do you think is the way forward, just briefly, before we move to the next participant?
Well, I don't exclude anything for the future, but I think we have to look into, perhaps we should start to look also into other possibilities for the future and how to produce cross-border statistics. I know that might not be the perfect solution, but it might be a good solution at least. So and we are now at Statistics Sweden doing a redesign of our labor market statistics, where we're able to use monthly administrative text data.
So there are ways forward. That's the perfect bridge to our next participant. If you just hold on for a second, we'll move on to Pernille Stender from Statistics Denmark. Are you there, Pernille? Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
You have worked extensively with what Jens was talking about, with this cross-border and getting around, some of the limitations. Yes. You worked in Ørsted.
I have worked.
You work there. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yes. I work at Statistics Denmark at the labor market division. And 20 years ago, I was involved in the development of cross-border commuting statistics between Sweden and Denmark in the Ørsted project. And the outcome of the Ørsted project was a database with information about population and labor market and education in the Øresund region. And generally, the Ørsted database have information, statistical information already made in Sweden and Denmark. But in one important area, a completely new statistic was developed, and that was the cross-border commuting statistic between Denmark and Sweden. And the statistic was developed 20 years ago, and the statistic is very detailed. It has information about the municipality of residence for all the commuters, and we also know where they work, and we have a lot of relevant background information on them. We know their salary, educational level, gender, age, of course, and so on, and which we also can see if they work in small or large workplaces. And
so this type of information, Pernille, what is it used? Could you say a little bit more what it's used for?
Yes, so we use a method which was jointly developed by Statistics Sweden and Denmark, and the method has 4 steps, and it is also described in the Nordic Mobility Report. And the method is based on transmission of microdata between countries. And this data exchange is necessary because each country only have information about persons working in the country. I could explain that in more detail if necessary.
Well, yeah, maybe you could expand a little bit on microdata. Now we keep people in suspense all the way through this webinar.
Should I tell more about the method we use? Or
yes, and what is it? What are we have learned that there are problems with this microdata, this personal information, and there are privacy issues and so on. So how can we work around it?
Okay, how can we work around it? Yes. Yes, the question is whether it would be possible to produce commuting statistic without a data exchange, and the answer is maybe yes, but the quality will certainly be less good. And firstly, if the cross-border statistics should cover commuting to and from both countries have to contribute. And that is because Statistics Denmark can only identify persons living in Denmark and working in Denmark and living abroad. And thereafter, we will have to figure out whether they are living in Sweden. We don't know that for sure if we can't exchange data with Statistics Sweden. And we also, ideally, we would like to know not only if they are living in Sweden, but also the municipality of residence. And in the administrative data sources, at least in Denmark, there is some information about the country of residence and also an address. And Region Skåne has funded a feasibility study, which will take place in the upcoming months. And the feasibility study shall reveal the possibilities, but also comparisons will be made on micro level with the former cross-border statistic.
So the Swedes are coming to our aid.
Yes, we will take the statistic, last statistic year we had in Ørsted, that was 2015, and we will compare these data with this more data from this more simple method and see how good the figures are.
So what you're saying is that we cannot get the best results, but sometimes the best is the enemy of the good, so to speak. We can get something, but we can't get everything.
Something, yeah. It is, in fact, it is the same method used in when we compile data for commuting from Germany to Denmark in this European project which Johan had the responsibility for, I think.
But we would like to think that we're ahead of the game. Maybe I can invite in Johan and Jens to the panel now. Welcome back, Johan. You said at some point that I don't know if we lost Jens, but he's there. You said at one point that you look up to the Nordics because we have such good data and we're so good at sharing it and so on. But now you hear that maybe we're not so good at it. Maybe we're actually going down to the level of the rest of Europe. So what is your advice to your Nordic colleagues?
Well, every advantage has a disadvantage. So I'm afraid that you were ahead of the rest of Europe, yes, using registered. But I'm afraid that we even see it in the Netherlands, where we also find a lot of registers. The the privacy issues are getting more important. So all these problems with the American companies using data without asking us, are people more aware and more hesitant to share data? And I'm afraid statistical institutes will suffer from this. So I am afraid that in the future it will be less difficult to share exact microdata. So we have to look at other methods to combine data in such a way that we can still produce statistics, maybe a bit less of quality, but use the information from all the countries, not at micro level, but at another level, and with technical, sophisticated methods, join them to produce statistics that are valuable to both, to all the countries. So I think we should collaborate in order to produce statistics that are can be used for all countries. And I think this is maybe a very interesting kind of project where to do a sort of pilot project at European level, maybe even funded by a European institute, and that we try it out in the Nordic countries or somewhere else together with you to have a look at technical solutions.
Well, maybe you can get inspiration from Pernille, from what you were mentioning, Pernille. Do you think that there are prospects for you to share this at a European level?
Yes, we would like to do so. This feasibility study is funded by Region Skåne, and when we have the results from the project, it can be decided whether cross-border commuting statistics should be compiled based on this method, more simple method, in the future. And the users have to decide that if they can live with limitations and uncertainties. But personally, I hope it somehow will be possible to exchange data again.
Yes. So
can I just clarify that regarding the exchange of microdata, because there are still possibilities to exchange data on a bilateral basis, and we have already an agreement with Finland to exchange data on highest attained education. So I mean, it's not that option is not gone.
So you're not closing down business here. This is a good note to end on.
Yes, yeah, I think so. And I think the proposal from Pernille is very interesting. I think that we can certainly work in that area forward.
Yes.
And also that I would just say that combined statistics is the future. That's what Johan is talking about. I think a lot of cooperation within Europe there will be perfect.
Okay, so we're back to the trust. Thank you so much, all three of you, and thank you for joining us today. I will give the word now to Ulla Ejerskov from the Nordic Council of Ministers for a few last remarks, conclusions of the day. Over to you, Ulla.
Thank you very much, Michael. And first of all, I want to get back to where Kaja started and celebrate this day, because in my working life in Nordic Council of Ministers, this is actually, like Anna Sophie said, is one of the most important projects in Nordic Councils, as I see it as well. I'm asked for these figures all the time. The vision of the Nordic cooperation is to become the most integrated and sustainable region in the world, and right now we don't really have the numbers, and I'm asked for them all the time. How much do we communicate? How much do we study in each other's countries, etc.? So I would like to celebrate and celebrate with the project and say that I think the most important thing said here today is that we have really got these border obstacles with regards to producing these statistics, which is quite odd when we are just about to measure the border obstacles, but that's how it is and how it has been. And so what we're going to do is celebrate today, but say that we're only halfway. But as we saw in this final part of the session, there are hope, and we will follow the work in in the Eurostat statistics very closely, and look forward to try to support the work that you do there and see if the solutions that you find in the Eurostat statistics can be sort of blown up to a full Nordic, more sustainable statistics on border regional commuting and working, studying, etc. But I think the time is gone now, and I'll give the word back to Michael, and again make a toast to the project group. If we could be together, it would have been nice, but I think this has worked out well. It's been a lot of people watching, and thanks for that. And Michael, I'll give the word to you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you to the people who followed us online. And thank you especially to the project group, Kaja, Nicola, that we from Finland, Statistics Finland, Helga and Marie, and lots of others that have been involved. The report is available at norden.org. And you can download it freely there. And as I said, you can also find more information in Nordic Statistics database, and or you can even ask your national statistics agencies for more information. So thank you so much. As Ulla said, this was an important, not a first step, but maybe a second or a third. And hopefully we can get back to a reality where we are actually living up to our vision about being the most integrated region in the world. So thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.